It's Hearthstone Grandmasters, European region, match number 1, Viper versus BoarControl. We're going to get into the deck list pretty darn quick here and let you know what's up in this one. BoarControl bringing Cyclone Mage to the table, and something that I'm looking at is the Rabble Bouncer that's in the deck list for BoarControl there, Derek. I think that is such an important card in this matchup he's got.
I completely agree. It's a pretty... I don't want to say fortunate bring for BoarControl because he decided to put it in there. It wasn't chance, but it worked out very nicely for him because a lot of the players, I would say, due to the nerfs to Rogue, have taken out Rabble Bouncers from their mages because that was one of the main reasons why you put it in your deck. When they go wide with a bunch of lackeys, you want Rabble Bouncer to be able to punish that. But going halfway here for BoarControl with one Rabble Bouncer is going to work out pretty nicely for him, as well as some other cards that I would imagine are pretty good in the matchup. Double Frost Nova against these kind of flood decks like Murloc Shaman and Zoo Warlock in particular, I think could be very, very powerful.
We've seen it be an absolute linchpin of winning the aggressive matchups for Mage, and even in just in the mirror matches in general. You know, so much of the way that you win right now is based purely in setting up your board and then getting the payoff on the following turn. I think it's one of the reasons why Warrior's so strong. When you set up a board, sometimes they have Brawl and a big result happens. So for BoarControl here, I feel like Rabble Bouncer is going to be important, but as we take a look at Viper's deck list, you can see why it's going to be so important. This deck has no shortage of aggression, and even once you make it over to the tertiary decks, there's just more burn, I think, that that BoarControl is going to have to handle.
Yeah, it's interesting with Viper's tertiary deck, because for BoarControl, it looked pretty obvious that he's going to stick with his primary. The other ones were for Mage and Warrior in secondary and tertiary, respectively. But for Viper, the tertiary definitely has its benefits with Soulfire, Life Drinker, and Leroy. Being able to get over the top of, say, those Grave Horrors, which Mage can put down for a little bit of extra taunt, has its merit. But at the same time, the Sea Giants that were taken out of the tertiary deck there for Viper could be a hindrance to his game plan, because Sea Giants, Mage very often goes wide on the board with Mirror Images and Conjurer's Callings in the mid game, against which Sea Giant is a pretty strong punish.
So that's what I'm curious about. I wonder how he's going to end up taking it, because the way that I see it is, number one, you have a tough time handling Rabble Bouncer. You can have a tough time handling a Mountain Giant into a Conjurer's Calling. If your setup is simply a Sea Giant, that can be strong, but if your opponent has a strong hand, you have to have a way to push and end the game after that. Yeah. And so I'm curious if he's going to look to just deal simply as much damage as possible and then have burn finishes, or if he wants to stick with the Sea Giant plan in game number 2 and possibly game 3.
Well, we'll have to see after we get done with game the first here in this series. With BoarControl setting out his game plan very clearly already, throwing away Mountain Giant on the coin is not something you would traditionally do when you are learning the deck, but is something I fully agree with in this matchup.
So what's important in this matchup? You know, obviously we talked about the importance of defense with Rabble Bouncer, you know, potentially with Zilliax. What else is BoarControl looking for?
Well, I think the main consideration is that the play of going for turn 5 Mountain Giant Coin Conjurer's Calling is often too slow in this matchup. So basically, BoarControl just needs to find anything to do in those turns before then. I'm talking Banana Buffoon, I'm obviously talking a big Sorcerer's Apprentice and Mana Cyclone turn would be the dream, could he find that, which is why I think he pretty much full mulliganed to try and find those key cards early on.
I'm going to take this time to mention my appreciation for BoarControl's setup. How the backdrop looks very clean, lighting is on point.
I don't think he even bothered setting it up in the first week. He's putting in the effort now.
He might not have had it. We had to ship it to players.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he wanted to show off his lovely Sea Story trophy in the background as well. His one trophy.
You could just keep it in his lap.
As here for BoarControl, it's been a little bit more of an interesting game so far. Viper has just had a pretty premium starting hand. Flame Imp is obviously the dream. When Viper was streaming this deck the other day, preparing for Grandmasters, he was talking a lot about mulliganing for the premium cards. You don't settle in the mulligan with this Zoo deck. If you have a hand of, you know, Crystallizer and other low-powered 1-drops, you don't want to keep that. You want to go for Evil Genius and Flame Imp as the premium early game cards, and he found exactly those.
Well, I feel like Magic Carpet's a pretty premium card in the matchup as well. I mean, the fact that your 1-drops turn into instantaneous effect means that you get to fight against Giants easier. It means that you can fight off Rabble Bouncer easier. It means that as you play 1-drops, they apply more pressure. Why did Viper deviate from Magic Carpet this turn for the Evil Genius? I'm very curious about this play.
Well, I think it's pretty simple. It's just in these early turns, he is trying to put as much attack power on board as he possibly can. Magic Carpet only has 1 attack, and when your opponent isn't likely to develop many minions, the rush aspect that it gives your 1-drops is less important than it could be in an early game tempo-based matchup.
So he should be using the Magic Carpet as a follow-up for reload rather than an initial setup.
Absolutely. When a Mounted Giant comes down or a Rabble Bouncer, in these kind of turns, he can then go for Magic Carpet 1-drop and start pushing through these big minions, whilst also getting the damage to face that he developed on the previous turn. I think this is a gorgeous setup from Viper.
See, this is what I'm curious about. I feel like if Viper had set this up ahead of time, not only would this turn be strong, he'd deal a little less damage this turn, but this would have been taken care of in a much more delivered fashion. I'm very curious about that setup because in my head, this was a slam dunk the Magic Carpet. Mage literally does not have a way to kill the card.
Yes, well, I think that's the thing to... It's an important distinction to make because I agree, Mage does not have a good answer to Magic Carpet at all. But what is the benefit of having Magic Carpet on board as opposed to the benefit of having more minions on board?
Put pressure on them when they don't have
exactly. And I think the benefit of just killing your opponent early on is worth more than the extra 1 or 2 buffs of +1 attack that having Magic Carpet down a turn earlier would afford you.
Take your lumps, and when they don't have it, punish them hard.
Yes, because now Magic Carpet is still going to stick around, giving buffs turn after turn.
It's a true story. I mean, that's a lot of the ways that aggressive decks just play. They throw caution to the wind and say, you know what, they got it, they got it.
But now here for Viper, even though he is pushing a decent amount of damage early on, he has undeniably been in control of the early game. BoarControl's starting to amass a hand that actually is looking pretty juicy here.
Yeah, something I'm looking at is next turn he's going to be able to play Mountain Giant for 3 mana. He also has
sorry, with the
evocation.
Sorry,
he can use that to discount by 1. But the other thing too is he has Khadgar with Mirror Image, which is a lot of extra life. He has Ziliac currently in hand. If he's not under too much pressure, I think he's able to consider investing in Mountain Giant.
Yes,
but again,
absolutely.
the problem I'm looking at is there's Magic Carpet on Viper's side. So if BoarControl is going to land Giant, I think he has to Conjurers the same turn.
Yes, and I think he will very likely do that on the following turn. Turn 5, you go for the 3-mana Giant, coin Conjurer's Calling. And then if obviously either of the 2 minions generated survive, you can go Khadgar's into the second Conjurer's Calling and probably just win the game on the spot if that is allowed to happen.
So what does Viper need? Does he need to just load up the board and find Grim Rally?
So he's already seen the 1 copy of Rabble Bouncer. So going wide on the board has less punishes. Because even though it allows Sea Giant, Conjurer's Calling on Sea Giant, there are no taunts at the 10 mana cost.
Nothing for defense.
Exactly. Mulch Muncher is the best you get with a rush minion. So basically, I think he just needs to keep developing onto the board as much as he can in these coming turns.
So is this an Imp turn or a Mecharoo turn? Or perhaps neither?
Ooh.
So there is some heat to Sea Giant here.
Because 4 minions on board means it is exactly not playable. It would cost 6 mana if it was in BoarControl's hand.
I'm kind of interested by that because that would be 10 damage in play for Viper on the following turn. Perhaps he's giving a consideration to like a Khadgar Mirror Image double Sea Giant turn, like literally the Nightmare. I think that's possible.
It's worth considering. It's definitely worth considering.
Also, some Mana Cyclone turns where your opponent gets to take advantage of the fact that you have a wide board. Perhaps you're filling up your board too much. Perhaps he wants to have a Knife Juggler possibilities from hand. There's a lot more to aggro decks than simply playing everything else. But to me, that's always one of the toughest things to distinguish. When you see a control deck do something like this, you often can think of a very exact reason. When you see an aggressive deck do something like this, I always look at it and go, what in the world? And then there's a ton of things to think about.
Right, and I think it is mostly Sea Giant because it stops BoarControl from playing vanilla Sea Giant on this turn. As BoarControl still taking it slow, does not want to go with his Uber turn quite yet, just wants to save up for the most powerful turn he can possibly do. Very possibly, if he can survive till then, looking to go for Mountain Giant, Khadgar's Conjurer's Calling.
Sea Giant cannot come down this turn for Viper.
Yes.
If he had one additional minion in play, he would be able to play...
That's true.
If he had one more minion to play, he'd be able to play now the other 3 cards he drew and the Sea Giant. I'm sorry, he would not be able to do that. He'd only be able to play 2 of them because the board would be full. But you get the idea.
I do get the idea. That's pretty unfortunate because Sea Giant, Mage does struggle to deal with these single large minions.
And so Viper here, I imagine, interested in using the Magic Carpet. I'm kind of interested in not doing that, though.
What did you want to do? Do you want to
Okay,
load
I
up
see. He is using a 1-drop to push
Yeah.
the Zillion.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was really the one thing that I was looking at with the direwolf positioning. I was like,
As long as he's getting damage through to face, I think I'm happy
Yeah.
with this play.
exactly.
I'm learning, Admirable. I'm learning. The ways of Smork.
And I think BoarControl here has to be interested in Mountain Giant. Mountain Giant at 4 cost right now, so it can go to 3, and then Conjurer's Calling.
Right, so there's a lot of different options now. We could see Elemental Evocation, Giant Conjurer's Calling. We could see Giant Coin Conjurer's Calling, Evocation, Mana Cyclone if he wants to refill his hand at the same time.
The one thing I look at is that BoarControl is safe to an Abusive Sergeant and a Grim Rally, I believe. Because that would be 1, 2, that'd be 6 additional damage on a board of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Right.
So he'd be alive at 1, and the burn in Viper's deck is limited to
very limited.
Evil Genius and Knife Juggler.
Yes.
Like everything else is minion damage.
Basically, even if BoarControl just passed here, he would be very unlikely to die on the following turn.
Yeah, so if you Mountain Giant Conjurer's Calling here, are you likely to die? I would think not. And he's going to settle on the same plan.
Yeah, I think I like this because Coin feels to me that it is more likely to be useful than the Mana Sight, than the Elemental Evocation would be.
Well, this is where Magic Carpet comes in big, is the ability to offset this and Grim Rally and Abusive Sergeant drawn!
Ooh. Okay, this is a turn of Hearthstone.
Yeah. All right, Viper, I'm going to sit back and watch what you do. You got this.
I mean, he has 5 mana and 5 1-cost cards in his hand.
And 2 of them of major impact.
So obviously the kind of the unsaid thing here is he has 8 cards he wants to play and only 7 or 8 minions he wants to get in play and only 7 board spaces.
So Magic Carpet with the Direwolf Alpha, he gets to rush in this for 3. So now he makes a 1/1 next to it. Now he gets to rush through whatever minions he needs to next.
Okay.
And then can Grim Rally the token that's disrupting the Magic Carpet at the finality and see if that's enough to push. I haven't done the math on pushing yet,
Smart.
but it seems like that's where this is headed to me.
And that is clearly what is going through Viper's head right now.
So if you're going to buff this, in my head, you should be buffing, yes, this way, so that way you can shift over the Defender of Argus into this position.
Okay.
He's got to hurry up, though.
He's getting through it. He's absolutely got it. Like you said, just needs to make sure he sequences it correctly.
I think this might have been
Yeah.
wrong. And you can see Viper's exacerbated reaction to it.
Did he have lethal there?
I don't think he had
did.
lethal, but
that was a lot of wasted
I
damage.
think that did not parse out correctly. He saw how to kill the first giant effectively. He didn't look at how to kill both giants in the best way possible.
And he sacrificed in minions before he got the full 7 mana buff. He only buffed 5 minions there, I believe, in the Grim Rally rather than 6. And now BoarControl, without a Mountain Giant in hand, needs to find some other way to stabilize the board. This is a pretty good start, though.
So that's one spell.
So I was going to say...
In my head, this is simply a Luna and Mana Cyclone turn.
Okay. We could see Coin Mana Cyclone, Conjurer's Calling the Mana Cyclone just because it gets stuff on board.
I feel like I want the Luna in play.
Okay.
I do like this first, though. It's not a lot of spells, but gosh darn it, you got to get something going.
Yeah, this leaves either option open. We can even see Banana Buffoon has its benefits as well.
I think I like the Luna still. So my issue with the Banana Buffoon here is that if you need Luna draws next turn, you have to invest that initial mana in the Luna.
Okay. I mean, I think he's definitely not going to need Luna draws. This hand on its own is very good. If these tokens are cleared up by Viper, well, that's fine, because if the tokens are cleared up by Viper, he then has the board space to go for a Conjurer's Calling on his Banana Buffoon.
I meant to Viper's draws.
Oh, right.
You can't utilize Magic Carpet this turn.
Right, sorry. I thought you were saying, wow, Grim Rally's great here.
No, it's not. It's quite poor.
Yes.
In fact, it's this poor. You're like, I better take this, or I might not get another chance.
Yeah, this is a final ditch effort here for Viper. His deck has effectively 0 burst.
Sea Giant!
Ooh. So what are we looking at now? If we were to play the Sea Giant, You could play double banana on the Banana Buffoon and the Cyclone, trade in both of them. Well, no, you want to make taunts, right?
He can't make taunts. He's got to find a way. The Sea Giant needs to produce at least one Mulch Muncher here. Or
there's got to be a better way.
Or Boar has to find options in order to win the game.
I mean, he could Conjurer's Calling his Banana Buffoon because there's obviously taunts on the 3 mana cost slot.
So with the Khadgar in play, I feel like you go for the Mulch Muncher. I feel like that's the highest density of defense on 10 because you have Deathwing, Mechathune, Mulch Muncher, Hakar, Sea Giant. What are the other 10 cost cards? There's not that many.
Yeah, there's really not many at all. He's starting off by drawing though, because I mean, if he hits Frost Nova here, the game pretty much just ends.
You can see why I at least wanted Luna in play last turn.
Another draw.
Ray of Frost is good enough.
That's huge. But he needs to do it quick, whatever he's going to do. Just kill stuff.
The tools of creation.
So this turn, I don't think this turn went ideally for BoarControl because the Khadgar should still be in play.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. I mean, he couldn't kill it off while keeping the Khadgar alive. Khadgar is overkill at this point. He does not need it. And BoarControl can just start clearing up now. It may not have been ideal.
Wow.
But with this turn, Arcane Explosion, the Sea Giant trades in first into the...
Trying to get the Magic Carpet above 8 health. And this another big turn for BoarControl. He has Arcane Explosion and a banana.
Clear.
Yeah, this is a full clear. And again,
and he sees it.
With the Burn and Viper's deck being limited, I think he's just done. And Frost Nova picked up as well.
So he knows that in the deck there is no Leroy Jenkins. The only burst, as you said, is Knife Juggler or Evil Genius.
Viper, you can see, you can't help but react to this one. And I have to feel that the turn with his initial Magic Carpet against the 2 Grave Horrors, I don't know exactly what he could have done better in the immediacy, but his reaction was either, wow, this was not a good turn, but this is the only thing I could do, or B, it was, I'm going to lose because there's nothing I could have done better.
Right, yeah, I mean, again, it was a lot of maths to pass through very quickly, a lot of maths, sorry, that he needed to try and get through a lot quicker there.
First Solarium was created thanks to Ethereal Lackey. Viper knows he's done.
Throws it down. That was a staggeringly close game there. So nearly getting over the final hurdle. But for BoarControl, very restrained play in the mid game. Not throwing down his Mountain Giant too early. Waiting for that prime opportunity to get a defensive wall set up. I think it shows a good understanding of the matchup in that they have no burst in the deck, so you can afford to take the damage as long as you have the final defense set up, which he absolutely did.
To me, this also spells how tough a matchup it is for BoarControl. I mean, we're talking he drew Ziliax and Rabble Bouncer and had Khadgar with Mirror Image and still was barely hanging on.
Yeah.
Like, I think the end of the game there, if you're looking at burn from Viper's deck or BoarControl missing one step, he loses instead. So he drew every single defensive option that he had available as a tech choice in that game.
He did. I would say in the early game, he missed out on a lot of the early key cards. Like he didn't find a Ray of Frost, a Sorcerer's Apprentice, a Mana Cyclone, a Magic Trick, any of the early game cards. But obviously, Mage does not have to do that necessarily. It has such powerful comeback mechanisms in the form of Conjurer's Calling with the Giants and the Frost Nova as well, as we saw, that it's not crucial to find those. But what I find very interesting, as you said, is that with a little bit of extra burst, Viper may have been able to get there. So I wonder if we're going to see him switch over to his tertiary deck, which has 5 burst cards slotted in.
I think it's a lot of bursts slotted in, and I think it could be absolutely necessary. We got to go to a break, but when we come back, we're jumping into game number 2 of the series and find out if Viper can turn things around.
One night, I was called on to scry. But what is this symbol I spy? It's my own crystal ball. Yes, I'll answer the call. And the others will come by and by. That's right. We be calling a team in. The Masters of Platin and Scheming. By this candle a-glowing, I surely be knowing whose gold will be once more a-gleaming.
My name is Tom Val, my handle is Viper. My username is just one of those boring stories where it's a 12, 13-year-old kid makes his first WoW account basically. You gotta pick a username, taken. Is this Viper taken? Oh, Viper's possible, nice, okay, whatever. It's a generic name, it's fine. And then I just stick to it. Being Grandmasters means that I'm one of the top 16 players in Europe basically, right? Which is really worth a lot for me because I always want to be the best, I always want to be competitive, I always want to do well. That's just who I am. I always try to be open-minded. I try to test whatever decks are good. January in 2016 it was, I think. I had almost 3K games in a month, just playing Aggro Shaman and Miracle. I think I've also played an unhealthy amount of J Druid and the Dragon Combo Priest after that. I just love those powerful decks, I guess. Being second at Worlds, it's such a crazy feeling and I'm not sure if I really realize it at this point. Now I'm just looking forward to Grandmasters, I'm looking forward to playing well. I want to play on the big stage, I'm really looking forward to that.
Each teammate I'm calling has stories. This tale's about riches and glories. Deep down in the earth, a king dreams of rebirth and refilling his gold inventories. Such a shame to have lost all that treasure. Join up, be a kobold of leisure. The cards now be calling. Someone new, no more stalling. And we next will be taking her measure.
It's Hearthstone Grandmasters for Europe. We're in our second week, our second day, and our first match, but our second game.
You are correct.
BoarControl up a game over Viper right now. Viper brought the aggressive Zoo deck to this to try to tackle some matchups that he anticipated. He actually had mentioned that he expected BoarControl to have Mech Hunter this one. And it just so happens that Viper's, I think, Zoo Warlock deck matches up pretty well against Cyclone Mage. But the nature of any matchup is that you're not 100%. And in the game number one, I think that the series of incidents that unfolded left Viper hanging. And so in this game, we're thinking whether or not he went to the burst options for Soulfire, Life Drinker, and Leroy in his side deck. It would require him to remove 2 Sea Giants and 2 Scarab Eggs, but I think those are pretty weak cards in the matchup.
Yeah, they're a little bit more, I would say, for the mirror matches, or at the very least more for the anti-tempo decks.
Wow, BoarControl's opening hand is solid.
Yeah, it's looking a lot more like it. It's kind of two halves of hands that are trying to do different things. Like the Sorcerer's Apprentices really want to go off with a Mana Cyclone turn, play a bunch of spells in one go. Ziliax and Rabble Bouncer are kind of more, they're less proactive hands. You just want to hold back and wait for your opponent to develop and then catch up afterwards. But this is starting to shape up to be looking like a pretty strong starting hand.
Yeah, one of the ways I'm looking at it is Sorcerer's Apprentice just, it helps you do something to board.
Yes. It's a 3-2 for 2, right?
Yeah.
I wonder.
And BoarControl actually considering here the Coin Apprentice mirror image.
Runs out on me.
I think there's a consideration for Coin Hero Power as well. Like you coin Hero Power into Hero Power, you've wiped out a 3-2. And
There's no healing in the deck anymore.
So he wants this option because he wants to eliminate the Flame Imp and potentially play another 3-2 next turn.
Wow. A third option that neither of us explored of just Coin Apprentice, just as you said, playing it out to...
I thought you just mentioned
board.
that.
I said with Mirror Image as well.
Oh, okay. I think Mirror Image is...
better saved.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
Wait for the right moment.
Yes. I mean, it had some benefit because it means that your opponent's minions cannot trade, so they have to stay alive, so Rabble Bouncer is more likely to be powerful earlier on. But
Knife Juggler on the other hand, I feel like this is one that you don't necessarily want to risk a Sorcerer's Apprentice against. So in this instance, I think if you play Sorcerer's Apprentice, you are absolutely ripping a Mirror Image.
It's pretty rough.
It does. And so I'm looking at this, and my head tells me Hero Power over the next 2 turns.
Yeah. It's one of those situations, though, where if you knew that Mana Cyclone was the next card in your deck, it'd be such an easy couple of turns, right? Like, you'd wait for it, and then you'd explode with that, but... I don't know, but playing the mirror image here in the Sorcerer's Apprentice, it doesn't really do that much.
It contests a knife juggler next turn, right? So he's going in. I don't blame him.
He's sticking to a game plan here. It is very much just trying to curb the aggression, just delay the game until he can get through to some of his power cards.
We can see the burst did move in. And so for Viper here, I feel like this is definitely a magic carpet turn.
Okay. Yeah.
If you trade off the 0-2, you have an 11% chance with 2 minions to clear off the Sorcerer's Apprentice. You have a 1/3 juggle, and you have to land the next one as well.
Some quick math.
It's just 33 of 33.
But did you say it's 1 out of 11, isn't it?
No, I said it's 11%.
Oh, 11%. Sorry, 1 out of 9. Yeah, yeah.
11.11, repeating, of course.
Of course.
Now that we've added the Leroy to the deck.
So many possibilities.
Viper deep in the tank, though. So Viper's looking at all the draws in the deck and seeing which iteration of draws pans out best. Whoa, first. I am really surprised that's first, because you're going to play both minions this turn. So he reduced his clear.
Well, he just wanted the highest chance to hit a minion, right?
Is the 0-2s relevant to hit? I don't think it is.
Okay.
In fact, I would quite disagree that they're relevant to hit.
So you think you just want to go for the highest chance of killing off the Apprentice?
Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, it would have been fantastic if he had.
Went from 11% to 8% with his iteration.
Yes.
What to do? What to do?
So it's a little over 8%, but fractions at that point.
Be precise. As this is just, for such an early game couple of turns, it feels like such a dense game. Like, there's so many decisions that could have been done differently already that would completely have changed the context of the game. Like, if BoarControl just hadn't gone off with the Apprentices early on, his hand would be way fuller, but he would have taken way more damage early on as well.
Heaps, I think, is the accurate description for the damage. Heaps of it.
Which he clearly is indicating with Viper switching over to his tertiary deck, which BoarControl now knows as well, because the life drink has been played and players are not told whether their opponent has switched decks.
Yeah, you have to get that information.
Exactly. And so BoarControl now has perfect information. I imagine he will have assumed that Viper would have switched, and therefore he's playing a much more defensive strategy with making sure he doesn't take any damage early on. But it's not going to work out that well. He is starting to take a good amount of damage.
Ziliak's in hand, though. And I feel like with Ziliak's, he's free to get out of this one. And Viper, this is back-to-back games where he has opted to not play the carpet on 3, which is really surprising to me. In this game, if he just plays the magic carpet on 3, Sorcerer's Apprentice trades a knife juggler, and then the next turn, your 1-drops just double in attack. Like, it's a lot of extra attack you get from magic carpet.
But he just gets less attack face is the problem. He's giving all his minions rush so he can trade more effectively, but he wouldn't have played the most amount of attack power on the previous turn and therefore pushed the amount of power on the following turn.
That's clearly his thought process. However, I would argue that when your 1-drops have twice the amount of attack as a natural buff, that over the course of a couple of turns, you get a bigger benefit.
Okay.
Get in there and fight, maggot!
I mean, this is the thing with Zoo, right, is it's not a very popular deck at the moment, so it has not been ironed out perfectly in its game plan.
So why would he pick off the Mecharo here over the Witchwood Imp? I guess because it can attack. There we go.
Yeah. 2 damage to face, keeping up with the pressure, because again, this deck has burst. He's still got 2 Soulfires and a Life Drinker left in the deck for over-the-top burst.
BoarControl now. Pair Ray of Frost. The hand is just... it's struggling. Like, something's missing. That's what it feels like with this hand.
So how does he approach this? The Rabble Bouncer is looking decent on this turn. With a couple of Ray of Frosts thrown in there as well, we could see a stagnation of the board, which is good for BoarControl, because that means Sea Giant is more likely to be playable on the following turn.
That's the tough part for me, is BoarControl really wants to land Rabble Bouncer Sea Giant in the same turn, I feel like. Like, to me, that's like the 1-2 punch. It's you get Rabble Bouncer, you're like, okay, wall's in place, there's the 8/8. Now I have payoff potential. So how do you set that up? Because right now, the amount of damage that Viper has is just it's honestly, it's annoying, where like you don't want to spend cards to clear this off. That works against your Sea Giant Rabble Bouncer game plan.
I'd say 7 damage on board is more than annoying at this point.
I just mean like in the terms of the individual basis.
Okay.
Like you need to clear off some of the damage, but it's very costly to clear off really any amount of it. Like that just took a full card to clear off a 3/2 and 2 mana. You're now again you're working against your Rabble Bouncer and your Sea Giant.
Yeah.
Ooh boy.
And again, another interesting point there from BoarControl, opting to use both copies of one Ray of Frost rather than one of each in his hand. Obviously, you give your opponent more information if you use one copy of each, but it means Mountain Giant is more likely to be playable in the coming turns.
That was a big juggle there for Viper as well. He needed to hit that Banana Buffoon.
Attack face with the Witchwood Imp and then Grim Rally it just so he can get a nice trade?
I think that's... Now that's tough because when Leroy's your last card, I feel like Grim Rally definitely gains a lot of potential.
What to save it for when you play Leroy?
So you Leroy go face, then Grim Rally it off. It's like it's surprise damage from your opponent. You know, perhaps they sandbagged a little bit of defense, and then you get them.
Looks like he's heavily considering it though.
I am in favor also of this.
He just wants to keep the board small, right? Like, the smaller he keeps the board, with small, like, few minions that have high attack value is the dream for Viper.
Huh, so when the Crystal, I guess, yeah, okay, never mind. I was like, when the Knife Juggler gets buffed, do you need to trade off the Banana Buffoon? But it has Rush, so yes, you do.
And interestingly here for BoarControl, with the top deck of exactly Mounted Giant, if he'd gone with the other line of play of one Ray of Frost from each, he would have been able to go Elemental Evocation double, and then Mountain Giant double Ray of Frost, which would have prevented a little bit more damage and potentially given him a higher out of having Conjurers calling off the top on the following turn. A higher percentage chance of winning should he get that, sorry.
I wonder.
But maybe Viper would have been able to better play around with the information that he'd been afforded. Complicated game for playing against a quote-unquote brain-dead deck like Zoo. A lot of decisions going into it.
I feel like playing against Zoo is often, it feels like playing against the puzzle, where you're like, how do I stop this?
Right.
And then once you stop it, you're usually, smooth sailing. Like, you've played the heroic runs and stuff. It's like, it's a tough thing to get over on the initial spot. It's very, very easy to win once you've secured it. Securing it's the difficult part.
BoarControl instead going with the Rabble Bouncer here. I guess just trying to mitigate some of the damage coming through.
Wow.
We can clearly see that just may not work.
I believe Viper wants the juggle to face. I'm sorry. Yeah, to face on this one. Although I can see him wanting juggle elsewhere. Oh, you know what? The juggle on the minion's better because you can Evil Genius the 4/2 away and use the lackeys to replace it. And the lackeys could also supplement the effect there as well. I really like this.
Genius on 40, man. That feels miserable. Whoa.
Yeah. Well,
that feels a little more like it.
Yes, exactly. This is exactly what he should have been looking at.
Does he hit the juggle again?
He does.
Yes, he does.
So now the question for me is, do you preserve the Kobold Lackey or do you just push damage with it? And I think you preserve it here, but I can see expending it as well. The reason that I don't want to expend it is for Sea Giant Conjurers calling exactly.
They can't do that though. Even if you play it, Sea Giant would go to 6 and they're at 8 mana.
So I'm thinking with Khadgars. I'm sorry, with Mirror Image or with Khadgar.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Like, I think in this spot, Viper's afforded the luxury of playing around any possibility. And if that means he plays around one extra by just slamming this Kobold, so be it. But BoarControl is at 8, and there's a Leroy in Viper's hand.
This does, however, guarantee that the knife from the Knife Juggler goes face.
Yeah.
And every single point of damage at this point could be crucial.
Yeah, Viper's got this locked. Leroy's too powerful.
He does. He does, yeah.
There's no measured
BoarControl.
Yeah, this is great.
And, throughout this whole game, BoarControl did not find the cards he needed in the form of Conjurers calling early on. But I think what this really comes down to is, was his two starting turns, was that the right way to play this? Because that really shaped this entire game. He tried to prevent as much damage in the starting 2 turns as possible, but overall does that prevent the maximum amount of damage? Or does that mean, yes, you take less damage in the starting 2-3 turns, but as the game progresses, you have so much fewer resources that you are unable to fight back on board and end up taking a lot more damage by consequence.
I personally, I like the game plan from BoarControl because I think the first point he needs to stop is a big Grim Rally turn. If the board gets too wide and Grim Rallied, he's going to lose on the spot.
Good point.
Even with the Rabble Bouncer in hand.
Yep.
And so the plan was Rabble Bouncer and Sea Giant. To me, that's the big statement there, is Viper just did a very good job of making sure that was checked and making the Sea Giant Rabble Bouncer turns as awkward as possible. And I think that bought him a lot of time to keep chipping away at damage.
And to be fair to Boar, there were a lot of outs or a lot of cards he could have got early on that would have made his game plan a lot more powerful, like Banana Buffoon for free bananas to throw down early on, or just an Arcane Intellect to refill his hand, a Conjurer's Calling maybe, to go actually make some defensive maneuvers.
That is an interesting perspective that we didn't visit there. From Viper's perspective as well, is that Sorcerer's Apprentice threatens to bring Banana Buffoon, and Banana Buffoon can then yield BoarControl some board control in that instance. And so maybe that's the top deck he was playing too. A very innocuous one that perhaps we didn't consider. So game number 2 in the books. Viper's tied up the score. We're going to find out who takes it after we go to a quick break here and our first match for Hearthstone Grandmasters in Europe.
Welcome to Hearthstone Masters. Today, we're going to share one of the biggest changes coming to Hearthstone in 2019, an entirely new competitive format called Specialist. Specialist will be the default competitive format for Hearthstone Masters. From online Masters qualifiers to live Masters Tour events to the pinnacle of competition, Hearthstone Grandmasters. Ready to learn how the new Specialist format works? Let's dive right in. In this new competitive format, players select 3 30-card decks to bring to a Specialist tournament. The catch? All decks must be from the same class. In this regard, Specialist is a major departure from most other competitive formats. Amongst every player's 3 Specialist decks, one is designated as the primary deck. The player's other 2 decks are designated as secondary and tertiary decks. There are no special limitations placed on a player's primary deck aside from regular Hearthstone deck construction rules. However, a player's secondary and tertiary decks must share at least 25 cards in common with their primary deck. In other words, secondary and tertiary decks must mirror the primary deck with up to 5 cards swapped out. It is important to point out that duplicate cards count when comparing to a primary deck. For example, if you want to include 2 copies of Twilight Drake in your secondary deck, and there are no copies of Twilight Drake in your primary deck, then you must spend 2 swaps to include both cards. Unique or not, if a card isn't in your primary deck, it counts towards the 5-card difference limit. A player's primary deck is important for another reason. Whenever a new match starts, both its players must begin by piloting their primary deck. Only after the first game concludes can you choose to swap into your secondary or tertiary deck. You do not announce which of your decks you will be using in the next game, and you do not have to swap. After every game, this process repeats, allowing players to swap or stay until the match concludes. Importantly, you can swap to any of your decks between games, primary, secondary, or tertiary, including returning to your primary deck if you have previously swapped out of it. And those are all the rules for Specialist, Hearthstone's new official competitive format. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and start brewing your own primary, secondary, and tertiary decks to get a jump start on the new format and innovate like the pros.
Let the battle begin!
Viper versus BoarControl is in game number 3. We've had BoarControl steal a game by the skin of his teeth. We've had Viper now burn BoarControl out of a game with Leroy and with Life Drinkers. And now we're going to find out who gets the better of it in game number 3. I feel like BoarControl's hand was okay in game number 1, but just missing a couple key cards to get a payoff. You know, had to use Sorcerer's Apprentices early to contest was the viewpoint from there. But, you know, if you don't follow up with Mage, I feel like that's the weakness of the deck. It can have some good stages, but it has to follow up.
Yeah, well, it has cards that are individually not very powerful on their own. They have to find the accompanying cards to really make things work. Like, for example, a Mana Cyclone Magic Trick starting hand. This is a lot more what BoarControl was looking for, being able to get minions on board, refill his hand, and contest board all at the same time.
And Viper, a pair of Evil Geniuses in the opener.
That's Genii.
Mind you, Scarab Eggs have been removed from Viper's deck list, so
Sure.
Evil Genius has a little bit less payoff.
It's definitely the cards he is looking for,
Yeah.
though. I love the double keep here. Evil Genius, obviously, the fact that Rogue has been so dominant has earned Evil Miscreant the reputation for being the most overpowered of the lackey cards. I would say Evil Genius is on par in power level. It's just disgustingly powerful of a card.
It's just Warlock that's the weak point.
Yeah, well, I mean, Warlock has just not been very powerful
Ooh.
this meta so far.
So for Viper here, the question is, what's BoarControl doing on turn 2? What's BoarControl doing on turn 3? And then as a result, when am I using these geniuses? And how do I take advantage of it? To me, everything spells this on turn 1, because on turn 2, everything BoarControl can play is a 2 health minion.
I think that is the first time I've ever seen Vanilla Cyclone.
I have done that a number of times.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never done that before.
There's a lot of Zoo on America's Ladder, Darok.
Okay, well, I've been playing all mirrors. Like, that's all it is, literally. I'm floating around 500 right now, and it's literally every other game I'm playing against Asmodai,
My
playing
goodness.
Mage.
Viper's hand is incredible. The thing about it is the first Evil Genius begets the second one as well. You get to use the lackey for benefit and then use an Evil Genius on the lackey.
Oh, they beget each other real good.
The future is ours.
And again, BoarControl continuing with his game plan of just playing out your cards. You need to contest on board early on.
All right, I'm very worried for Boar. I am very worried.
So what's the game plan this turn then? Do you want to use the coin to go as
I want
maximum
to use,
overdrive as possible?
I want to use as much stuff as possible.
Okay.
So the question, I guess, is do you Soulfire first or Soulfire second? Because the one thing I really want to have happen is I want to keep Evil Genius,
Yeah.
and I want to keep Knife Juggler.
You want to play the Knife Juggler?
I want to play the Knife Juggler,
I agree.
and then I want to Soulfire.
Put this apple on your head.
I love it.
This maximizes the potential to keep Evil Genius. Lackey gets pitched away. You're not too worried about it.
Yeah, you're not too sad about that one.
Faceless Lackey, he tries to go for the 25% juggle here. Misses it. Both to face, though. That's the second best.
Yeah, perfectly reasonable there. As long as it wasn't one of each, you're pretty happy there. As BoarControl is keeping up with some decent draws so far this game, to be fair to him.
I feel like he's about to get pushed out, though.
It's not looking great for him,
I feel like he is super dead.
as opposed to regular dead.
Yes. Regular dead, yeah, good game, you know. Like, it was hard fought.
He's super dead.
He is getting very close to super dead.
Viper even hits the Ethereal Lackey to buff the Mana Worm. Everything is going his way here.
I'm looking at Witchy Lackey being a potential impact.
He doesn't believe in the Mana Worm.
Well, it's there's not a lot of spells in the deck.
Yeah. I was being pretty tough.
Ooh, there are mechs though.
There are mechs. Mecharoo.
And so since Viper cannot land two juggles, his options are to trade Evil Genius, or it's to Voidwalker to try to just stop the board.
I love trading there to stop the, what move did we call that? The Hunter Ace of Conjurer's Calling on your damaged Sandbinder.
I'm looking at Dark Possession here. The other two are just incredibly weak options.
Yeah, they both suck. I like this a lot.
I suppose there's maybe some weird merit to blowing up your own Voidwalker, but the Dark Possession can blow up your own minion to play around a Sea Giant or around a Bouncer.
I was going to say that Dark Possession could discover Doomguard, but I remembered we live in dark times indeed.
So BoarControl has to figure out what's the turn that I use Frost Nova.
What's his win condition is his main thing he needs to think about here, right? So if he just pings this turn, Mountain Giant costs 5 next turn, so Evocation Giant Frost Nova is not a possibility on the next turn, which is dreadful for him because that's the kind of play he needs to make to wrestle this back.
I'm looking at Rabble Bouncer draws. I'm looking at Sea Giant draws.
Yeah.
Those, and alongside a payoff as well.
That's definitely what he needs to be going for. But I've got to be honest, I think Viper will be playing around cards like that. These one-attack minions, I would be very surprised if they hit the board when he's already got such a dominant position in terms of damage.
Runs out on me.
I mean, the big payoff right now is Grim Rally, and that's what
Right,
BoarControl.
that would be insane.
It's exactly what BoarControl is afraid of. Your opponent just played an Ethereal Lackey, and they have 2 natural in the deck, and they have 2 draws coming next turn if they want. There are now no more mechs in the deck.
Yeah, a little bit of an unfortunate draw there.
See, to me, I wouldn't be too surprised if some more minions hit play.
This is actually pretty sick.
My.
Viper decided to target his minion there with the dark possession rather than his own face.
Solidify the board.
Exactly, just make it weaker for your opponent to go for Rabble Bouncer. I think that's a great play.
Not only that, but it makes the board denser.
Exactly,
well.
exactly. It means there's less minions with low attack in play.
A random arcane explosion from a Mana Cyclone.
Gorgeous. Because
beautiful.
Obviously his own health total does not matter 1 iota here, really. So he just wants to make Rabble Bouncer as weak as possible for BoarControl.
All right.
That's exactly how you do it.
If those mountain giants were sea giants, different game. I mean, for Boar, you have to just go in here, right?
Well, what does he do? Like, we could see Frost Nova, double mirror image, elemental evocation into the Mana Cyclone to try and find Flame Strike or Blizzard or...
What else do you have?
Right. Or we could see Mountain Giant, Evocation, Giant, double mirror image.
I could picture a Banana Buffoon Frost Nova to try and set up and hope you get another Frost Nova on the following turn, because you'll have the mirror images in play to supplement on the following turn as well. So if Viper only has 5 minions in play or 6 minions in play, you're not taking a heap of damage on the back of the 4 mirror images in play.
I don't know if I... Wow. BoarControl's going for
I
it.
like this.
Really?
Because this is going to yield him more random effects from the Mana Cyclone. And honestly, right now...
But don't you... Doesn't it gives you more activations, but it means you have to hit exactly Frost. You're right there, buddy.
No, I'm not. I feel like BoarControl right now, as he's going to feel in a moment.
He needs something to happen right now.
The reason I like this is because BoarControl has to seize the board in order to win the game. He needs a better fortune. 3 spells is not going to be enough. He has to hit perfect 3 in that instance. In this instance, he has to hit Frost Nova and then something big to do.
Yeah. Well, it's all in on that. Viper playing pretty hands up there.
Yep. Was that a Rebel Bouncer?
Oh! That is a draw. That is a draw. So BoarControl needs... Does he need to play to the out of Frost Nova? He can't even afford that unless he went Evocation into Mana Cyclone right now.
The other thing, too, is that with the draw of Rabble Bouncer, it lets him make a play like this instead.
Trade in the Buffoon.
And he wants a 1-cost spell to use.
Oh, he hit Blizzard! Oh my god. I mean, Viper is getting down to a fairly low health total here.
Okay. Sit back and watch.
So if Viper cannot clear the Giant, BoarControl can go Blizzard, attack face, and then attack face again on the following turn for lethal.
There is a technical lethal here for Viper, although it requires a tremendous amount of fortune. He has 2 Knife Jugglers and a Microtech controller. I mean, this is a lot of damage that Viper has on the backswing here.
Can he ever guarantee lethal by sacrificing off enough minions to make board space?
Well, it's not a guaranteed lethal. The Knife Jugglers can go anywhere.
Right. But with the Leroy and... No. Yeah. I was just...
Oh, the first one goes face.
Those were 2 good targets. He wants to hit taunts and he wants to hit face.
He's got to get this going though. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here. And now his
He's just got to do stuff. He's just got to play.
That means
he's got lethal. He hit it.
Lethal. Whoa! Oh my gosh, Viper! At the last, knife jugglers are scary, okay? That's the long story short. Do not mess with knife juggler. You're gonna put those apples on your head, and he's gonna get there. Viper with the Leroy play, instead of swarming with knife jugglers, finds the lethal out.
And talk about redemption. For his play earlier on with trading into the Grave Horrors, where he messed up the maths a little bit, in that turn, he knew exactly what he was going for. He tried to play to the outs. He hit it. And to be honest, if he hadn't got lethal there, BoarControl was in with a very real chance of winning that game.
Yeah.
Lizard attacking face could have just delivered lethal over 2 turns.
It would have put Viper in a position where he needed to connect some damage and then have to draw Soulfire or have to draw Life Drinker or something crazy after that happened, which was pretty slim at that point. But you do have a Solarium draw in there as well. But either way, he finds lethal at the very end thanks to the pair of knife jugglers. And it sounds like Viper is ready for an interview. Viper, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
I can hear the chuckle in your voice at the end of that one. Talk to me about that series, Viper. That one was pretty good.
Honestly, it's unbelievable how stressful it is to play Zoo. Like, the deck has so many micro decisions of placements in terms of which is the next minion he can play, and then it's mage, so they're like all the 7-drop, all the taunt outcomes, there are mirror images, there are banana buffoon buffs, and you have to think about trading stuff of Direwolf off. What if you top deck the carpet, the rally buffs, how everything. The deck has so many micro decisions. I messed some of them up, which makes me sad, but I feel like it's so difficult compared to most other decks at the moment.
It just makes Microtech Controller that much more fitting in the deck in terms of name. I wanted to ask you specifically about Magic Carpet. I have tended to play that card right on turn 3. You were deviating a lot from it and going just for more attack on board. Can you talk to me about that thought process?
It kind of depends on the game state. You usually want to develop Carpet a turn before they can go into Mountain Giant stuff or before they want to like do mirror match turns, etc. So, like as long as you kind of just put out the damage on the board, hit them in the face, and the turn before they want to have their comeback swing turn, you develop the Carpet, so their comeback swing turn is like way worse because either you just trade images off or you trade Grave Horrors, you trade Mountain Giants. The Carpet is insane.
So I know that you practice, well, we all know you practice an awful lot with Bunny Hopper in particular as another Grandmaster. And I wanted to talk about your decision not to go for Cyclone Mage, given that he actually messaged me the other day saying that you and him had come up with Mana Cyclone Mage before the World Championship Finals just a month or 2 ago. How come, if you created this deck, why didn't you feel that it was the decision to go for here in this week, as Bunny Hopper also did not feel it was the way to go?
Surprisingly enough, neither Bunny nor me talked a lot to each other this week. So we kind of just like came up with it our own that it's not the good call. And I think it's the same reason why we thought, well, it's not the best deck to bring to Worlds, because if you have a short time of preparation, you play a short amount or like a little amount of games, then you see what Mage can do sometimes, and you're like, well, this is crazy. But you need so many games to figure out, well, how consistent is it actually? Is the deck just like on average maybe 48%, and like sometimes it doesn't happen and you lose, or is it on average just 55, or I don't know. And I'm almost at the point where I think that Mage is kind of overrated. People just defaulted to bots. Well, what do I play? What's good? Mage seems fine. Like at worst, I don't know. At worst, I can just high roll people with Mountain Giants and so on. So I think the average of the deck is actually not that great. It's a good deck, but it's not. It shouldn't be as represented as it is this week.
And finally, I wanted to ask you about your choice. I saw you tweet out that you weren't expecting necessarily Mage decks, but that you felt you still had an edge over them. What were you expecting coming into this week? Do you think that the number of Mage represented was what you thought was going to happen, or did you think it was going to be different?
Honestly, going into this week, I expected that some more people are going to try out the aggressive mech bomb hunter deck. Some people might even try the 9 lives deck, because Spider Bomb and all the like big minion swing turns are pretty difficult for Mage to deal with. So there were a lot of decks that actually have good game against Mage, and I expected to see more of them. And then there's things like Token Druid to counter these decks, and then Token Druid gets countered by Mage. So it was really like mind gaming, especially with 1 day into actual nerfs. So I thought like, well, no, very few people are going to expect aggressive decks at all. Warrior doesn't even play Weapons Project anymore. There's no rogues that have backstabs. Like decks just don't really fight for board early on, and Zoo can just snowball them. And Zoo was kind of a bit favored against the Murdoch Charm, which did the same, so Zoo just seemed to be the better deck. Also, just, I don't know, it just kills Mage. Mage can't go nothing, Intellect Mountain Giant. It doesn't work.
All right, well, Viper, I think it was a great call this week, and I think it paid off for you in this match. Congratulations on your win, and look forward to seeing you play tomorrow. I love Viper.
I really do. Just as a streamer more recently, I love watching his streams, super educational. And that whole series, his decision to bring Zoo just feels like a classic meta-analysis from Viper, who just never takes anything at face value, to be honest, doesn't trust other people's opinions all too much because he knows he's so good at the game that he can trust his own instincts. He found the weakness in the overall meta at the moment, which, as he says, is not fighting for early board control, and Zoo punishes that beautifully.
Yeah, I think Viper, another thing I like about him is he'll just tell it like it is.
He absolutely will.
If he thinks I'm wrong, he'll just tweet about it and tell me that I'm wrong. And I like that. I appreciate it because I learned from it as well. You can see why he's the runner-up at the World Championships. So, Viper takes his match 2-1 over BoarControl, which means we are moving on to number 2 of 5 today. RDU versus Orange is coming up next. Don't go anywhere. It's Hearthstone Grandmasters for Europe.